Welcome to a free tip of the week brought to you by AccessLearningZone.com. I am your instructor, Richard Rost. In this week's lesson, I'm going to teach you about record sets, which is accessing data from your tables using VB code. This is an advanced lesson, so if you're new to Access, you might want to skip this and move on to one of my basic lessons. In this class, I'll be using Microsoft Access 2003 to show you this example. Okay, I've created a blank new database called Attendance. I've created two tables, a student table for keeping track of a list of students, and my absentee, which is going to keep track of the days those students were absent. The student table is real simple. For now, it's just got a student ID, which is an auto number, and a student name, which is text. Of course, in a real database, you'd want to have first name, last name, and all that good stuff. But for right now, we'll just keep student name in here so we can tell who's who. I put a real basic list of students here, Mike, Joe, Sue, Bill, and so on. And this is so I can just pick the students from a list later on instead of having to type them all in. My absent table has an absent ID, which is an auto number that we're really not going to use, but it's got a student ID, which is a reference to the student ID in the student table, so it's a number, and an absent date, which is a date-time field. Essentially, I'm going to put each student in here and the date they were absent. So you'll have Mike, and then January 2nd, and then Bill, and then January 2nd, and so on. It's easier to keep track of which days the students were absent than which days they were all in class. So we'll just track the days they were absent. Now let's create an unbound form. So Forms New, Design View, don't pick a data source, hit OK. Let's put a list box on here so I can see a list of my students. So I'll make sure my wizards are on, pick list box, and then drop a list box over here. Look up the values in a table or query, next. Get your list from student T, next. I'm going to turn the toolbox off because it's kind of in the way. Bring over both of those fields, that's fine, next. Let's sort the list by student name, next. The key column is hidden, that's okay, that's our student ID. There's our list of students. Next, what label do you want? That's fine, student name, and then hit finish. In fact, I'm going to delete the label by clicking on it and hitting delete. And now if I save this form, let's save this as my attendance F for form, save it. If I take a peek, there it is, I've got a list of my students. Now I'm going to turn off the record selectors and navigation bar by going into my form properties. And I'm going to scroll down until I find the scroll bars, turn that off, turn record selectors off, turn navigation buttons off. And there we go, just a blank form now. Now so that I can pick multiple students on here, I'm going to open up the properties. First of all, let's call this my student list instead of just list 0. And find the multi-select property. Multi-select is right here. Let's change that from none to simple. What's the difference? Well, I cover that in my full classes. Okay, for now we'll just pick simple. Basically, it has to do with the way you can select the items in your list box. Alright, so my goal is to click on all the students in the list box, and then I need a date up here so I can specify which date I'm checking attendance for. So let's drop a text box on here, and this will be my date. And let's call this box, let's open up its properties. Let's call this my absent date because it's the date we're tracking absence for. No control source. And let's make the default value equal date, like that. That'll put today's date in there when I open up the form. Alright, let's slide that over here. Now I need a button. Let's turn the wizards off because we're going to write our own code. Find command button. Drop that button right here. And we're going to call this button mark selected students absent. Alright, I'm going to select a bunch of students over here, make sure the date is correct, and then hit this button. Let's right-click on this button and go to Build Event to bring up the VB Code Editor. There it is right there. Now again, I cover all the basics of VBA in my Access 300 level classes, so I'm not going to cover what all this different stuff up here means. I'm going to assume you know some of this. Hit Enter. We're going to put some code in this button that's going to mark those students absent. Now before we can do this, we have to check and make sure we have the proper references to be able to add this record. So click on Tools and then References. You'll see the References box pop up, and make sure that you have Microsoft DAO 3-point-something object library here, usually 3.6, and make sure that it's above Microsoft ActiveX Data Objects. If you do have this one checked, make sure DAO is on top of it, higher in the priority level. Now the first thing I need to do is loop through all the selected items in my list of students. Now I'm not going to explain all of this. I cover this in my full classes, but it will take too long to go through all this right now. But here's the code you need. dim I for each I in student list dot items selected. Alright, and then next on the bottom, we're going to loop through all the selected items. Alright, we're going to create our own sub called mark absent student list dot item data I, just like that. Okay, it basically loops through all the selected items, calling each one of them I, and then we're basically going to send that item to a new sub called mark absent, which we're going to write right now. I cover for each loops in detail in my Access 300 classes. Alright, they're not exactly easy, and I'm not going to go through them all right now. Okay, now let's make the mark absent. Private sub mark absent. Some stuff in here. Alright, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create ourselves a database object, dim db as a database object. You need that to create your record set. Dim rs as a record set. Okay, what is a record set? Well, it's a set of records. Okay, it can be a table, it can be a query, it can be an SQL statement, it can be all kinds of different things. Alright, set db equals current db. In other words, my database that I'm going to be using is the current database, the one that's currently open. Can you open a different one? Yes, you absolutely can, and I show you how in my full class. Set rs equals db.open record set. Which table do you want to open? Absent T. My table that tracks absenteeism. Alright, what are we going to do? rs.addNew, we're adding a new absent record. rs exclamation point student ID equals the current student that is sent to mark absent. How am I going to send something to mark absent? Well, I'm sending an I, right? We have to collect I here. So I'm going to send I as student ID. Okay, so that I becomes student ID, which is now going to be set down here. Okay, that's basic parameters. Okay, rs absent date equals absent date. This is a field on the form absent date. Okay, it's right there. This guy's called absent date. There's its name up top here. And we can use it in the underlying code because it's part of this form. Okay, rs update to save the record, and then rs.close to close the record set. And then it's always a good idea to destroy anything that you create. So we're going to say set rs equals nothing and set db equals nothing. And then when we're all done, this is just going to set one student at a time. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back up top here. And after this loop runs, we're going to say message box done, just so everyone knows we're finished. Alright, let's close our code, come back into here, and test it. Let me resize this real quick. Alright, save that, open it up. Let's give it a test now. Let's pick a couple of students, and then hit mark students absent. Alright, I get my done message box, and let's check the table. And there they are. They're marked absent. Now there's all kinds of things you can do with record sets. You can loop through records, you can read data, you can edit records, of course you can add new records. There's a lot you can do, and in my Access 320 series I cover record sets in detail. I go through all this stuff nice and slow. Plus I show you tons of different examples of things that record sets are used for. This is just scratching the surface. And I know I went quickly, but I only got 10 minutes to work with here. So this is the quick view of how to use record sets. For more information on record sets, come to my website at accesslearningzone.com. And if you go to this special link, accesslearningzone.com/YouTube, you can try my Access 101 class absolutely free. It's a full hour-long class, and you'll get a 50% discount on all of my courses, including my record set courses.